Hi, welcome everybody. Hopefully that last panel got you all woken up after lunch and we're ready to go. So this panel discussion, we're going to kind of take things outdoors a little bit. We're talking about construction and engineering challenges on 5G densification, and really specifically focusing on small cells built on either existing, replacement, or new poles in the public right-of-way. You will notice that we are a man down up here. Rick Mull from MasTech was unable to get out of Florida because of the hurricane, so it's just going to be the three of us. To give some intros, I'm Colleen Connolly. I'm a partner at Scherer Design Group. We're an AE firm that provides engineering and construction management for small cells.
Hi, I'm Kevin Russ, founder and president of Laurelwood Consulting Group. We advise and do technical due diligence for private equity and venture capital firms looking to get into telecom and 5G specifically.
I'm Josh with GPRS. I lead the telecom and power divisions for our company. We locate private utilities, so we're a private utility locating company. We really focused on the engineering and construction sides of all market verticals.
All right, and we're going to jump right in, and feel free if anybody has any questions at any point, just kind of stop us and we'll entertain questions as they come up. So just starting right into it, what are the some of the major concerns that you see, challenges for engineering and construction in the small cell? Josh?
I think lack of information, especially regarding underground utilities, is a huge challenge. Construction firms and anyone designing, foundations or anything 5G related for poles, underground utility information is almost non-existent. So that creates a huge challenge for anyone in this space.
What issues does that lead to?
I'll use a company I'm working with for an example. There's a 60% failure rate on sites that they've designed to actually being built. So they get into the field, realize there's something in their way that they didn't know was there, and that process starts all over again. So now you're waiting on permits again, more site acquisition if necessary, maybe construction costs to find out you can't build your location there. So there's a lot of things.
And I'm going to ask another question because somebody might be thinking this. How about the one call? Every place you see, call before you dig. Why isn't that enough?
Well, the task they have is enormous, right? I forget the metric, but 60, there's millions of miles of underground utilities in the ground, right? And the majority of them are public, especially when we're talking about working on the right-of-way. So the task they have is very daunting, but there are a lot of utilities that aren't in that 811 system, that they're not going to be identified by that free service. So really it's up to everyone that's engineering something to do their due diligence and make sure that something that is avoidable is avoided.
If I may, Josh and I met some time ago, but to me, it's absolutely imperative to scan the ground at the design phase before you even go for permits to know what's there so that you can properly design any foundation to work around what's there, because you don't want to find out once you open up the ground or you take a light pole down to replace it that you can't do what you planned on doing, and then you've made the municipality very unhappy.
Information gathered in 2019 is better than information scribbled down in 1960.
Excellent point. The other issue that I would bring up, more from maybe the engineering, but also going into the construction side, is just the act of actually working in the public right-of-way. On any job site, you need to make sure that the site is safe for the people that are doing the work. But when you're working in the public right-of-way, you have the unique opportunity, maybe, I think it's an opportunity, to be working really close to the public. So you want to make sure that that is also safe for vehicles traveling along the road. There may be some traffic control that you need, detours or whatever. There may be some permitting necessary through that, which you'd have to get from whoever owns the right-of-way. It could be the DOT, it could be a municipality. Definitely making sure that you're following all of those rules. Not following those rules is a really sure way to get the police there and shutting you down really quickly. And pedestrians are another impacted piece there. If you're putting anything that's going to impact a sidewalk, you may need to do actually a pedestrian detour. How are you going to keep pedestrians from getting into the work zone, and how are you going to get them safely around the work zone, following all of the necessary ADA regulations and all of that stuff. So another potential issue or challenge that I would throw out.
Just going back to making sure you do your due diligence and picking the proper site and working with the municipality, however you may be, all stakeholders have the buy-off before you start into permitting, because once you start down that road, if you realize you haven't done something goes wrong, you're losing massive amounts of time and you're going back and starting all over again. So a little bit of extra due diligence up front pays off.
And can you expand in that a little bit? Because who are all the stakeholders? You know, you said you want to get an okay from all the stakeholders, but just to go into who all of those stakeholders are.
So you, depending on what you're doing, if you're replacing a pole, so the pole owner, number one, if you're going on an existing telephone pole, it could be the ILEC or the power company. You want to make sure whoever your client, whoever is going to own the small cell 5G. And then a lot of times where I see, what I've seen, at least in my experiences, is whoever's providing the fiber is not normally involved in the process. That's kind of run on a separate track, and it really all needs to be tied together. And then the municipality itself.
And on that, what issues specifically with the fiber are you seeing? Is that not being able to bring fiber to the location you've selected, or?
I've seen, and I think Josh might be able to also add on this, but I've seen where the node goes on one corner and the fiber is delivered across the street to the other corner. And it makes a huge difference, especially in areas that won't let you go above ground. So then all of a sudden you have to do a boring across the street. And
That's not that big of a deal. Especially in New York, right?
yeah, exactly.
And you'd never run into any utilities if you had to do something like that, I'm sure.
Not in New York. No way.
And are you finding consistency with the utilities? I think that's another thing that I would throw out there is know the utility company if you're using any of their facilities, just because one utility company may let you go on a pole that has primary service of primary electric on it, another utility may not. So there's a lot of variation there.
So you have to make sure that whoever the pole owner is, you follow the attachment agreement. I'm a big proponent of there should be possibly a national standard for attachment, because each utility has their own attachment rules and they vary greatly. And I've heard, well, it's safety. So one power company will not let you go above primary, and they say that you cannot do it because it's not safe. But you're required to use their contractor to do the work, but it's still not safe. But you go over to an adjoining utility in the next state and you can go over primary. So in some areas, the existing infrastructure that you can use may be in the 8 to 10% range, and the next utility over, it could be 30, 40. I think there just really needs to be a national standard, personally.
They're all private companies, so good luck with that, I guess, is
I know.
probably the bottom line, but everybody can dream.
Right. Well, I mean, if that was a wish, that would, it would just probably make it too easy.
And I guess to your point on that is really about the selection process. is to making sure that when you're identifying candidates, that you're really looking at viable candidates based on jurisdiction, based on utility company, based on what all of those stakeholders are going to be, to know that you're not traveling down a path that you're not going to able to be constructed, or somebody's going to throw up a roadblock at some point along that lines.
And with that, I mean, I've recently written a case study. I'm still waiting to be able to use their name. But we did 400 locations for polls. And during that investigation, we found 530 utilities that were not identified by the 811 system. So you could potentially say that there could have been a line strike at every single location, or multiple line strikes at every location. And the cost of one line strike, I mean, you could pay for a portfolio of 400 locations with just one damage, right? If it's bad enough. Safety is obviously a huge concern there. No one wants to hit a gas line and send a column of fire up into the sky, but we've seen it happen, and we've seen it happen again and again. So really, how's that going to change?
Just if you can back up for a second and explain a little bit more about what you do, how you do something differently than the call before you dig people.
So that service is more of a, I want to say, a ticket-based service, right? The volume of calls that they get is crazy. Each person it's in the field they're scheduled to do 30 or 40 locates a day. So how much quality do you really think you're going to get? There's not enough time. So for a private company, now we're working for maybe the construction firm, maybe the engineer, maybe the carrier, at least on the site acquisition portion of the carrier. We're actually a consultant in the field instead of getting through these as fast as we can. So really, we can spend as much time as we need to on a certain location to get the full picture of what it is you're up against, and really provide a lot more documentation than what you're getting elsewhere.
And what types of technology do you use to do that and make sure that it is accurate and correct?
So a couple things: electromagnetic locating devices, ground penetrating radar. We also use sewer cameras and traceable routers. So there's not too many things that we can't identify, and it's not really the technology that's making that possible. It's combining all of that together in a written process. The process is really how we're so successful.
And okay, so I'm the engineer. How are you going to translate that information that you find in the field to me so that it can be useful? I can place that pole to make sure I avoid all of that.
Yeah, every pole location has engineered drawings, and you might have some utility information depending on where you're working and what utility company or municipality you're in. We can take all of our information and put it right on your drawing. So you have, I don't want to say more accurate information, it is more accurate, but up-to-date information.
Okay, so you won't miss the thing that was just put in there a week ago and they didn't get that in the one call.
Well, so something that was put in a week ago, you should see fresh digging per se.
It's true. If you missed that, then you just weren't paying attention.
One thing, we talk about the light pole replacements and looking at foundations, but even scanning the ground for just a new pole set, where you're going to order a pole from whoever to have it put in for a small cell. Scanning the ground, a lot of these processes, you put in your application, wait 30 days for the make ready, and you can wait up to 90 days for the pole to be set. Before that company goes out and sets a pole, they're going to do an 811 call, and if there's something in the ground there, they're going to say, no, you can't put the pole there, and you start back at zero. So you just lost 120 days. So at that time where you decide that you're going to, at the very beginning, even if it's just a new wood pole set, have the ground scanned, make sure it's clear, and you're good, and you're not going to lose 120 days.
Yeah, no one wants to get put to the bottom of the utility company's to-do list, that's for sure, so that makes sense. Any other things you guys want to add as far as challenges or potential challenges? All right, we're going to go right into the lessons. Oh, okay. Any questions before I go forward?
Right back here.
Yeah.
With your experience with the small cells now and the rate they're going up and the challenges, with all the talk of the millimeter wave for 5G requiring 10 to 100 times more density of those sites, do you really think that's realistic in the next 5 or so years that we're going to see that type of density happen in actual deployments?
Well, if we pull out our crystal balls on that one, I think there's a lot of things obviously that are coming into play on that. I mean, there's even regulatory changes that are pretty much happening in real time now, all of which are going to influence that and influence what municipalities are accepting of small cells, which ones aren't, how much that can get pushed through and how much it can't. Is it possible to construct that? Probably anything's possible. So, if you're optimistic, yes.
I would say the biggest, it's going to answer your question a little, it will depend, is it possible? It'll depend on who the power company, what the attachment standards are within a certain area. Some areas, it's very possible because the attachment standards are much easier. And the ones that are very difficult, I don't know if it's possible. I mean, well, I'm sure we're all going to try.
I think it's feasible, but as I've found out, it's not feasible when you're experience a 60% failure rate on trying to build locations. So, I mean, it's possible.
And then I think as a follow-up to your point on that, there is that difference between getting something permitted, getting it approved. That's kind of hurdle number one. And then you really don't want to then hit hurdle number two of having an issue when you're actually going to construct it. So both of those things come into play. Any other questions? All right. Let's jump into some lessons learned. So what have you experienced during your build of these, maybe some of the war stories, if you will? What are some of the things that have maybe gone terribly awry, or at least afterward you're saying, well, we probably shouldn't have done that
Kevin's
way.
got a good one.
The whole reason Josh and I met, actually, I was doing an installation of a foundation, had 811 called, did everything. We actually even potholed down to 4 feet to make sure that there was nothing there, and started to do the foundation and ended up hitting a 12.5 kV line. I'm lucky to be here. That was not supposed to be there and was a lot deeper than it should have been, which then led me to find this man and used him ever since.
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to say it's easily preventable. How long do you think it would have taken us to find that line?
2-3 minutes.
12 kV is pretty.
So that's a big lesson learned. Yeah, that's what got you here for sure. I would say one of my lessons learned was that municipalities are really, really fickle. So just because they loved that pole, decorative pole you were going to set, and they were all into the aesthetics of it, if that administration should happen to change in the time before you were talking to them and before you're going to actually go and start installing them, that's like a whole new world of change. And suddenly the most lovely install in the world becomes the hugest eyesore that you're trying to put in their town. So constantly checking back on those issues, especially when it comes with municipalities, when it comes with the aesthetics of things, that can just it can just be really bad if they don't approve it every step of the way. And along with that is kind of overselling how unobtrusive it will be. We're all used to this. This is what we do. This is our technology. And in a strange way, we probably think that even monopoles are beautiful. Not everyone feels that way. So what you think is not going to be a significant install in that town, they may view that differently. So making sure the right stakeholders that can approve that are willing to speak for the town, that they're all at the table and they give you the feedback that you need, and just checking in on that.
Along the same lines, make sure you build exactly what your drawings say. The quickest way, especially is to start off on the wrong foot and just whatever you present, whatever's in the drawings, make sure that you build it that way. If for some reason you cannot, don't try to get it past them. Flag it immediately to the municipality. Have the conversation, because begging for forgiveness after will just destroy your whole plan.
And along those lines, I think what's even more important is kind of going back to the question we had about the density of these, is you can't think that you're going to be the last one to be approaching that municipality or approaching that utility to put one of these small cells installs in. So you kind of have to play as nicely as possible, or else it's going to start getting really hard when you're coming back to put in another 100 nodes or whatever you need in that municipality. So those changes during construction, the adage of ask for forgiveness afterward, all of that can come into play and make it a little bit difficult for the next guy in line, if you so.
When you do pick a site, make sure you also are actively talking to the pole owner, especially in the area, because one thing I've seen is you may design a whole polygon. It may take some time to get municipal consent, whatever, approvals, and the outside plan is an ever-changing environment. So a pole that you may have picked may now have a power down riser that makes it unusable because somebody used to have an aerial drop to their house and they moved it underground. So it's ever changing. They're running new lines, adding things all the time. So time is of the essence, and if you are being delayed, make sure you keep open communication with the power company to make sure that what you picked is still going to be usable.
Have you noticed those types of changes happening a lot? Or I'm thinking also along the lines of what other utilities are on the pole and how can that impact?
I've actually ran into a lot down along the Jersey Shore with upgrades, especially things that it's been a long time in coming, but it came from Sandy, and things that were planned, and down in that area, you're not allowed to go above primary, and poles, there was areas where there was no primary, and by the time everything made it through the RF selection and whatnot, they were adding primary, and all of a sudden a whole pole line is no longer usable.
So that was part of, I guess, resiliency projects after the fact. Yeah. I know the other thing down in the Jersey Shore areas is after Sandy, a lot of the houses had to get raised. And when they were raised, they needed to do a new utility drops to the house, and they went underground. They were aerial to the old house, but then once it was raised up, rebuilt, then it all went underground, and that's what we ran into too. A lot of those risers popped up out of nowhere overnight.
Yep, and as soon as the power riser's on the pole, it's no longer usable.
Yeah, so
for some power companies. Other power companies, it is. So that's where,
knowing who you're dealing with, of course. And then with approvals, approvals from utilities, any issues with that? Getting approvals, obtaining that? Either of you ran into?
I think the biggest thing I've learned, and this isn't just, it's all the power companies, and they're pretty good about telling you they're in the business to deliver power. That's their number one priority. We're just kind of pain in their butt.
Yes, being someone's biggest hassle is really never going to get you to the top of that list that we were talking about before and getting construction done. And that was one thing that we've run into as soon as, when you're especially dealing with the electric company, you can have things flowing really nicely. You think you're about to get your approval. If there's a major storm, that really means no one at the power company is doing anything other than dealing with that storm and the outages after it. So suddenly that can put a 2, 3, 4 week delay in your project that you could not have possibly seen coming at all.
And beyond that, not just a storm with it. So a lot of these power companies are owned by a bigger power company elsewhere. So you may have a storm not even in your area that you don't even necessarily know about, and people are being pulled from your area to go work on that.
Yeah, which can then put them at a reduced staffing, and I mean, they all claim to not have enough people anyway, so they're definitely not getting to those approvals and things that you need at that point. This is more of a construction-related question or issue, working within the right-of-way, working with the power companies, are you finding most power companies require you to use a specific contractor, any contractor? How is that working in most localities?
It's a power company by power company, and where you're working on the pole.
Okay, so like everything else, and it's an approval process that you need to go through and make sure that you're talking to the right person at each power company. I think that was a lesson learned that I went through on some, is everyone said we had approvals, but apparently there were approvals from the wrong people. So making sure that you're engaging the right people at that utility, and that they're all on board with it, which really kind of goes back to the same thing I was saying about the municipalities and the ever-changing face of their approvals, which is kind of the same thing. So any parting words, I guess, maybe Josh, drive home your message.
Yeah, I don't build anything or engineer anything, so it's a great panel title for me.
Well, I'm glad you're here, because to me, your job is one of the most important. So, I mean, scan the ground. It's easy. It can be done way in advance. If anything changes under the ground, you're going to know it because you're going to see disturbed soil. So.
Awesome. So just to wrap up, I think our most important messages were make sure you know what you're dealing with underground before you start, because getting to the end and having to change that is not going to be pretty for anybody. Making sure you have the approvals you need, including traffic control and safety, and just doing the due diligence all the way through. So I think that wraps us up, so thank you very much.
All right, thanks once again. Colleen, Josh, Kevin, very much appreciated. Thank you all.